Quasi here, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can control your mind and completely end suffering once and for all. And I know that's a lofty claim to make, but once you really understand this cycle and understand how your mind works, it's not really that difficult. It's just a matter of time until it happens. Okay, it can happen very, very quickly. This was something that was important to me because I saw in my journey in growing my business, I was always suffering. You know, my attachments and my expectations and what's happened in the past, what's happening in the future, they always caused me suffering. And the more I suffered, the more it reflected out and the business suffered too. So what I want to really share with you here is how to live your life in a sustainable manner, but also how to take control of your own life and not be subject to your imagination and what's happening in your mind and all of this overthinking. Okay, and just sustainably get to a level of success and be able to maintain it. Before I begin this video, I want to quickly announce a couple of spots I've opened up for the free one-to-one consult with me and my team for the Reality Mastery program. Make sure you wait around till the end of the video to hear the announcement on how you can sign up for this free consult and what this consultation call really is. And with that, let's get started. So in this video, I want to talk to you about controlling your mind and ending this suffering cycle, okay, and why suffering actually happens. Now, recently I've been reading this book. It's called I'm That by Maharaj Nisargadatta, and it's on Amazon. You can probably buy it, but it was a very, very interesting book, and it's probably been the most eye-opening book I've read in 2020. Like, that's for sure. But it's also a very, very dangerous book. I wouldn't encourage everyone to read it, but you have to have a certain level of spiritual, emotional maturity, mental maturity as well before you read it, because you can misinterpret it and just become like a nihilist. And while it can be perceived as bad, not everyone's ready for it, right? If you're probably watching this video right now, you were watching this for a reason, and this book has come your way for a reason. So what I started to notice when I was reading that book was, you know, a lot of contradictions were coming to surface, right? You read one idea and you know one idea to be true, and then it contradicts it, but then you let these ideas sink in, and then they start to make sense once you start to apply them and you actually inquire within, right? So what I've started to notice, and what I really found out within the past couple of months, is that suffering happens because of this identification to that which is not real, okay? So identification with the unreal causes and is the root cause of suffering. What do I mean by that? Anything that you're seeing right now around you, this hand, this chalk, it's not really real. Right? None of this stuff is real. It's unreal. Because by the definition of reality, reality is that which never changes. If something is changing, it's not really real. Right? Just because you can see it, sense it, and perceive it doesn't necessarily make it real. Okay? So if you were to think about it this way, in your dream, if you return to the same atmosphere, the same environment, the same people, every single night you had a recurring dream with all of these things that just never changed, that would appear to you real, right? So this reality that you're perceiving in waking, in consciousness, if you will, is another form of unreality. It's just another form of a dream, okay? When people realize this, they just, they lose it. They're like, oh shit, so what's the point of anything? I'll show you what the point of anything is. But understand for now that this identification with that which is not real is what causes this suffering. Because if you get identified with something that's always and constantly changing, you're going to suffer, right? Because you're going to expect it to stay the same and just be like this for the rest of your life. But when it's not, then you're going to suffer, right? And understand that there's a difference between pain and suffering. Okay, pain is this indicator of danger that's impending for the body. Okay, if there's danger in the body, you will feel pain. Suffering is danger in the mind, okay? When there's impending danger to the mind, then you suffer. Because this is an indicator of you just getting attached to that which is not real, okay? If you want to influence your reality, if you want to become a master of your reality, you've got to understand what reality really is, right? You've got to step back past the illusion and be able to identify with that which is real, okay? And have a reference point. It's kind of like being able to control a dream and having a lucid dream. If you have a reference point for the dream and you truly realize, once you begin to realize that you're dreaming, now you gain control of this dream. So just like that, in this conscious awakening, If you start to realize that all of this is a dream and an illusion, now you begin the power to influence this dream and this illusion. Okay? Now, going back to the concept of suffering, why suffering really happens is because you start to identify with everything as me. Okay? There's pain that occurs in the body. You say, pain is happening in my body. And you just can't see anything but the pain. So this awareness gets tied into the body. The same thing with your thoughts. Any thought that you have that arises, your awareness gets tied into the thoughts. And because of that, awareness can't see itself, its true nature. It's focused and it's identified with the thought. So this thought arises as my thought. This is me. So everything that you see, this lens that arises, it arises as me. So when you start to think everything is you, and you falsely identify with that which isn't real, then you're bound to suffer. Okay? So please keep that in mind. You only suffer because you identify with every single thing as you. You know, you say, this is my house, this is my car. When the car goes away, when the house goes away, oh, this is my income level. When the income level goes away, then you suffer. Because a part of you was attached to it, it was identified to it. So you lost your sense of self. And why this attachment happened is because you haven't truly found your sense of self. Like when you're born, all these memories come up in your body and, you know, all of these events happen, and then you start to identify with these. Awareness gets tied into these memories and all of these events, and awareness loses sight of itself, its true self. Okay, all of these things are your false self, right? This is getting like really meaty right now, but I just want you to pay close attention to this and just bear with me for a second while I explain this. So in this diagram, we have what we call your self, your higher self, or your self, the true self. Then there's the mind, and then there's the body, right? These are all this is the barrier. What happens is when you're born, as you grow up, as you get accustomed to things, the self gets identified as the mind and as the body. It doesn't know how to experience its true self, right? This self is pure awareness. This is what we call pure awareness. So when you're born, and how the universe really came about, if you read ancient yogic texts, it began as nothingness. Nothingness evolved into awareness. Awareness evolved into consciousness. Consciousness evolved into the mind, and then the mind into the body. Okay? Nothingness, awareness, consciousness, mind, body. These 5 stages. Now, within these 5 stages, so you might be wondering, what's the difference between awareness and consciousness? Consciousness is a temporary state, right? You have a state of consciousness. Just because you can remember what you had for dinner last night, you say you're conscious. But doesn't mean you weren't aware. So bear with me while I explain this. You can remember you had dinner last night, so you can say you were conscious. But just because you can't remember what you had for dinner 2 nights ago, doesn't mean you weren't conscious. You were conscious at the time, right? But you just can't remember it. So we tie in our memory to consciousness. So this is what I mean. Consciousness is a state of change. You can be conscious at one point, but not be conscious at another, and just do things unconsciously. So consciousness is that which observes the mind and the body, right? But that which observes consciousness itself, the background for consciousness, is what we call awareness. Awareness is the background on which all of these things occurred. So to understand this a little bit better, you can be aware of consciousness, but you can't be conscious that you're aware. You can be aware that you're conscious at this moment. So really try this. Right now, at this very moment, you can be aware that you're conscious, but you cannot be conscious of being aware. Okay? So this goes to show that the root, the source, is awareness, right? Even this can be transcended. But I don't know how, so that's why I don't talk about it. What I do know is awareness and being pure awareness. So that's why I can talk about that. So in understanding that, this self gets reflected into the mind as the thought I am. When you stop identifying I am my body and I am this thought and I am my car and material possession, and when that sentence isn't completed anymore and you just realize I just am. I am. When you realize that, this is the reflection of the self within the mind. When you have the thought, I am, and you truly feel that I am, you get closer and closer to pure awareness. You aren't there yet, but you get closer and closer to it. So we're going to do an exercise by the end of this video to help you get in touch with that, a 4-step exercise, okay? But understand now that there's a self that gets reflected in the mind, okay? Between the self and the body is the mind, right? And in this mind, we get identified to the gross nature of things like thoughts, like things that we can see, because we can observe thoughts and we can feel feelings and we can touch things. Those are the things we get identified to. But things that are beyond the perception, the sensations and the feelings is that we can't perceive, that is beyond perception. That's the self, right? So right now there's someone observing these thoughts and someone observing the observer of these thoughts. It's just not in your awareness, but it's still there. So it's like the clouds, but there's the sun. You can't see the sun because the clouds are over the sun. The mission is to uncover this sun, right? So in understanding this a little bit better, we go to the nature of thoughts, right? So we have the object, which is the thought itself. A thought arises. And then the action itself of thinking. I think this thought. And then there's this I behind the thinking, which is the subject. All of these happen in pure awareness. Awareness is like the paper. All of these things are like the ink, right? What we don't understand is you can use the ink to understand the paper. You can use all of these as a ladder to pure awareness. And that's what we're going to do here. This is how the cycle of suffering ends. Thought, thinking, thinker. The solution to a restless mind is to go beyond the mind. The solution to a painful body is to go beyond the body. Right? So the solution to suffering and pain is to go beyond it. And what's beyond the mind and the body is awareness. It's when you become aware of it. So really think about it this way. When you start to observe something, you're no longer identified with it. When you have a really terrible thought and then you sway with the content of that thought, you become identified with that thought. But when you start to no longer go with the content of your thought, right? When you no longer go with the content of your thought, then you start to become a little bit conscious of these thoughts. And you start to see a separation between the thought and the thinker. An interesting phenomenon happens here. Now you can choose to observe the thinker itself and the act of thinking. When you observe the thinker itself, the one that's thinking these thoughts, now you start to realize that this whole thing becomes a jumble. This whole thing becomes a huge jumble of just thinking. This whole thing just becomes one big thought. And now there's a separation, a true separation. And you start to see these as not you. When you just eliminate all of the false ideas that you had, that's enough for you to get to self-realization, right? That's enough for you to connect to this pure awareness. It becomes a temporary moment, but within time, as you keep practicing and inquiring more and more, this becomes the natural state, okay? So the solution to all of this is to go beyond. How do we go beyond? In 4 simple steps. Let's try it out right now. Just take a pause and let's do this right now. So how we're going to do this is understanding awareness, consciousness, and mind. Okay? Awareness, consciousness, and mind. But we're going to go from the gross to the subtle. Okay? Because that's the only way to go. It's difficult to go the other way around. You've got to climb the ladder. You can't just begin at the top, with this kind of thing at least. So when we begin at the mind, I ask you to take a pause right now from whatever you're doing, and just take a pause and take an inventory of your thoughts. Don't go with the content of your thoughts. Just disregard what kind of content and where this thought is leading, but just watch the thought that comes up. And when you start to watch these thoughts, they become still, right? Automatically your mind becomes still. And then you ask, what's the next thought? The mind becomes stiller. So now that the mind is still, ask yourself, who's the thinker behind these thoughts? You watch the thought and the thinker behind the thought. And once this happens, this all becomes thinking. I'm just verbalizing this, by the way. Me verbalizing this to you means nothing unless you experience it for yourself. There is the thought, and now you're watching the thinker that's watching these thoughts. But someone is watching the thinker and the thought. Who is that? Thought and the thinker that's watching this thought. Who am I that's watching this thinker? I am. Who am I? The answer is just wordless, right? It's beyond words. This state of emptiness is closer to this than this or that, right? I can't really describe this in words, but it's just a state. This is a state. But the more you start to do this and you start to peel back the curtains more and more and more, and you start to inquire everything, you start to inquire, like, who is it that's even observing this? Who is observing and making this video? Who is observing and looking at that mug? Who is observing and looking at that laptop? It's really difficult to describe in words, but what happens here is this self, instead of going to the mind, it turns back on itself. Awareness of awareness itself. Awareness of consciousness. Awareness of everything. Awareness now gets turned back on itself. This is the moment where everything ceases. Like all the thoughts, all the feelings, they cease. And you become I am. But even deeper than that is going beyond I am, when I am doesn't even exist. That's what Maharaj in the book called supreme reality. I don't know that yet. That's why I'm not talking about it. But what I do know is this. Experiencing this state of peace. Even this state of peace is a state of being. It's a state of consciousness. You go beyond that. You observe who's feeling that. So the 4 steps to doing this every single time are, number 1, you begin with watching the thought. Because sometimes you just get lost in the thought. Thought. Who's this thinker? Who's watching this thought? Number 3, who am I? And there's no answer. There's just bliss. And with that, I conclude this video. Thank you so much for watching. I sincerely hope this was helpful. I'm going to do a quick recap. There's not really much to talk about here. It's more to be experienced for yourself. So I urge you to just watch this video over and over again, understand the exercise, the procedure, and just go ahead and do it. The root cause of suffering is identification with that which isn't real. The real is that which never changes. Find out within you that never changes, and suffering will end. Cling on to that which never changes within you. Awareness never changes. That state, it never changes. Really think about it this way. Within me, there is that which observes this body today that it did 5 years ago. It was a different body in a different state and a different feeling, but that which within me observed all of those, was aware of all of those, that never changes. That which is within me that observes my body and my thoughts, and that which is within you that observes your thoughts and your body, it's the same. Right? That's awareness. That's the unchanging, the reality. Pain indicates danger in body. Suffering indicates danger in mind. Whenever there's resistance, you have pain. Right? Whenever you're not willing to go with this pain in the body, there's suffering. Whenever you're not willing to go in with the thoughts that are happening and you don't like them, that's suffering. And everything arises, the sensations arises, I feel in my body, my hand, my property, my mind. And what we talked about was, in order to go beyond all of this, you've got to go beyond the mind and the body. And how we do that is connecting to that which is the witness of all of this pure awareness. Because there is the thought, you begin by observing the thoughts and the content of the mind. And when you do that, you are the mind. When you go with the content of your mind, you are the mind. When you become conscious of the content and you don't go with the content, you are consciousness. When you watch consciousness, you become awareness. When you become awareness and you're aware of being aware, then you get a little bit closer to transcending this. Right? And thank you so much for watching. Sincerely hope this was helpful. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit that little bell there so you're notified of any new video that I put out. And also, I'm super excited to announce, as I mentioned before, the free one-to-one consult with me and my team for the Reality Mastery Program is now open. Make sure you click on the link in the description below to sign up for that. I'm looking forward to speaking with you there. Who this call is for, by the way, is only for entrepreneurs who are looking to take their businesses to the next level. And you find that you have all of the tools, tactics, and strategies, and they're not quite working. Internally, you haven't found this self. Internally, you haven't cast this I. And because of that, the right opportunities aren't coming your way because something internally is unseen and unknown to you. That sounds like you. Make sure you click on the link in the description below to sign up, and let's see how we can help you undo those barriers and take it to the next level. And the free Facebook group is also open for you to take advantage of. The link for that is also in the description. Guys, I sincerely hope you enjoyed this. Okay, please leave me a comment too what you thought of this, and if you want me to make more videos like this. Thanks. Till next time. Peace.